I'll post it today. So
Thank you.
no problem.
That's great. Have we found out if we can hear Kelly yet?
We can hear her. She's a tad, she might break up just a little bit. She's actually in northern Minnesota.
Oh my.
So she is emailing me his introduction just in case something happens, then I have it. So.
Okay, cool. Hey, Mark. Vern,
I made it.
you made
I'm
it.
signing in.
Perfect. Yeah, you know the drill. Type your name in, all that good stuff. How you doing, Vern?
I'm doing well, thanks. How's it going to work now? Is Barb still going to run the show, or you taking over and she just does her presidency?
Well, she is running the show. I will assist with the occasional thing of like telling people to sign in at the beginning and that sort of thing, but
Sure, good.
she's the boss.
Yeah,
Good.
he's going to handle like introductions and announcements. He's taken that part.
Yeah.
He will, he and I will both be muting people as needed. So
Okay.
be forewarned.
Yeah, I appreciate John putting that on about the golf tournament. I see it's on there now about tying into the different programs that you can. Fundraising. We're going to
I'm
push.
sorry to hear about your brother's death, Vern.
Well, thank you.
He's 92?
No, he was 90.
Wow.
My mother was 96, and when she passed, and my brother, he was the only one left besides me. I was the youngest of the family. But anyway, yeah, we've had some good genes there. So
Yeah, we've got the same thing.
my dad, he died real early because of a heart attack. You know,
And then enter.
So. But anyway, yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah, bless you. Jim, you look awful comfortable.
Me? Yeah, I'm less nervous today.
Yeah, he just transferred all that nervousness to me.
Well, you're all practiced up, Barb. You're in great shape.
Thanks. Well, I got to tell you a fun story. So my son helped me set up this whole, you know, did the background and stuff. And I talked to him about the challenge of providing eye contact to the camera, not looking at all of you, right? So I got to show you this. I'm going to take it off. So, excuse me. So he made me a smiley face that I can put around the camera so that I can look at that face, which is smiling at me, which will make me smile. And then that way I can do more eye contact directly to the camera.
That is innovative right there.
And he's an engineering type, so.
It's helpful because I preach on Zoom sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And I need that focus.
Yeah,
Thanks.
and actually it does kind of help because instead of just looking at that blocky, camera, I am looking at a smiley face. So it kind of helps. So you can take that one, Mark.
Appreciate it.
Not a problem.
Having a smiley face look back at me while I'm preaching. I can't tell you how dull people look on a Sunday morning.
Well, that's quite a talent to be able to smile and conduct yourself and talk at the same time, because I think the one that does the best job of that is the gal that does the announcing for the Hawkeye events.
Oh, yeah.
Mm.
She's good. She's always smiling and she's always so enthusiastic, and yet she's carrying on. So I really enjoy a talent like that. These newscasters on WMT and WHO are pretty good too.
Right.
I guess.
It's like walking and chewing gum, right?
Exactly.
So Anant, I'm
Yes.
probably gonna just, you could either mute your camera, or not your
Sure.
camera, but your microphone. Just,
Sure.
You can keep
Will
your
do.
camera going, but.
Hey Barb, can you hear me any better?
I can, yeah.
Okay.
Good.
She must have built an antenna on top of her car or something. Don't know.
Something like that. Some aluminum foil.
Right. Well, helmet makes better. For all of those of you who are just joining, if you could sign in, if you're here this early, you've probably got the drill down, but if you could sign in the chat so that we can keep track of attendance, that'd be great. We're gonna get started about 12:03 precisely. Good to see y'all. Hi, Linda.
Hey, there's Dave Brown. I gotta say, Dave Brown, I want to thank you. I went to my office and, you know, previously I saw the new tree that you planted outside my office, but now I have seen the plants around the tree. And so that's great. Thank you very much. Someday I will be back in the office and I'll be able to look out my office window and see that and enjoy them, you know, but at least I know for now that they're there.
I'm glad you like it.
It looks good. It does.
Thank you.
Sean, you had your hand raised for a hot second. Is there something you wanted to say? Sean McIntyre?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
You can.
I wanted to sign me in. I'm driving on the interstate, so I didn't want to be typing and texting. So if someone could sign me in, that'd be great.
Yep, you got it. Eric.
Hey.
And Brad, the Wicklins. Hey, Gary.
Hello, everybody.
Hello, Gary.
Hey, Gary. How are you? Good to see you, Greggs. Carlin.
Hey, how are you? Hi, everybody.
You have me on as attending?
Yes, we do.
Okay, thank you.
Shaner. Tim. If you're just joining, you'll see a whole bunch of people typing their names into the Zoom group chat down there. Hi, Mustins. Welcome. If you have a second, if you could sign in there so we could help keep track of attendance, that'd be great. We're going to get started about 12:03. Good to see y'all. Steve.
How are you, Devin?
Pretty good. How are you doing?
Great.
Hi, Alyssa.
Sorry, hi.
No, you're good. You're good.
Serendipity. Woo-hoo.
Woo! Hey, Mary. Jim.
Hi.
Pete Wallace, can I get you to email me your address I want to deliver your crystal and your pins to you, but I don't know where you live. Can you just email me your address and I'll get them over to you?
Will do.
Thank you.
That
Pete.
Vern said that?
Yes, it is.
Yes. Okay.
Thank you, Pete.
Tara, David, Mike. If you're just joining the call and haven't signed in yet, if you could sign in the group chat, that way we can help keep track of attendance. We're going to get started at about 12:03 is what Barb tells me for her first meeting as president.
It's gonna go great, although I am a little nervous. You know, it's all the moving pieces, I think. And we have a full meeting today too, so. Okay.
Hi, Lynette. Patty. If you're just joining us, we've got a lot of people signed in the chat already. If you could join them for attendance purposes, that'd be great. We're going to get started here in just a minute. Hey, Ryan.
Hey, Devin, how are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Good. Barb, I see you got the banner. It looks nice.
I know. How about it? It's a little, I may have to revamp the room because I can't see, there's no light coming from the window anymore. And, but trying to make it work, trying to figure it out. Okay, so Devin, you think we're ready?
Yep.
Great. Well, thank you, everybody. This is the meeting of the Iowa City Noon Rotary, and I would like to call the meeting to order. And as many of you know, we actually start the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you could, please stand and join us. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Great, thank you all. Here we are at the beginning of July. Welcome to the Iowa City Noon Rotary. And before we really get started, I'm going to actually turn it over to my partner in crime, Devin, and he's going to give us a few Zoom tips for those of you who perhaps are newer to Zoom. Devin?
Yep. So a couple of simple things. One is that if you want to see the lovely faces of all the other people here at this meeting, which is one of the many reasons that we do it, in the top right corner of your screen, there's something that says Speaker View or Gallery, and then there's a bunch of little icons like 9 dots in a grid. Click on that and you can see a whole bunch of people and all the people who are here with you. When we get to the speaker, I encourage you to go to Speaker View so that you can see Anant and really see the presentation that he's going to give us. A couple other things, announcements for when you want to ask questions at the end. You can raise your hand by clicking on Participants, and then there's a little option that says Raise Hand, and that allows either Barb or myself to see it faster. You can also go to the chat if you want to share anything as we're going through. If you could sign in for attendance, that would also be great. If you like. No, that's it. Back to you, Barb.
Great, thank you, Devin. So at the beginning of our meetings, we like to do some introductions for any of the guests that we have or any visiting Rotarians. And so just as a reminder, if you'd like to, you can go to that participant button at the bottom and do that raise your hand feature that Devin just mentioned. And then Devin will actually call on you to introduce yourself. You can unmute your microphone at that time and do so. So I'm going to turn it over to Devin to see if we have any introductions today.
So I have Kelly Staub with her hand raised.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kelly, and my guest today is actually the speaker, Anant Kamath. Anant, do you want to say hi? I'll tell you a little bit about him when I introduce him in a second here.
Sounds great. Welcome, Anant.
Right. Pleasure to be here.
We're excited to hear what you have to say.
Thank you.
I'm going to attempt this name, but please, when you introduce yourself, say it again. Shaylin Harrington has her hand, their hand raised.
Her, yeah.
Her.
Yeah, my name is Tashaylin Harrington. I am the Community Engagement Manager here at Shelter House in Iowa City. And I was invited by Barb to come along.
Great, welcome.
Thank you.
Those are all the hands we have raised. I know we've got a visiting Rotarian, Gary Wickland from the Vail Club. So he's here.
Phil Peterson.
Yep, Phil, say hi.
Hi, Phil Peterson, Iowa City AM. Happy to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, welcome.
Thank you.
Any other visiting Rotarians or guests? All right, welcome everybody. Back to you, Barb.
Wonderful, thanks, Devin. And then next we will move on to announcements. And so again, if you have any Rotary related announcements, if you could use that raise your hand feature in the participants button, Devin will call on you. Before we go to those though, I do have a few announcements. I wanted to let everyone know that the Rotary Club of Madras, India, which is in District 3232, sent an email sharing their good wishes for the new Rotary year and asked that we share that with the rest of you, and that is what I'm doing right now. In addition, I wanted to let you know that we did get an update from Rotary about the polio eradication efforts. And unfortunately, it is not the best news in that there has actually been an increase in announcements of polio cases in the world. And so now those are really only in 2 countries. But in 2020, the wild polio case breakdown is that there are 55 cases in Pakistan and 22 in Afghanistan. And as you know, Rotary International is working very hard to try to eradicate polio, but we wanted to just provide that update and just encourage you to do all you can to support polio's or Rotary's polio efforts. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Devin for introductions.
Dave Brown, you have an announcement.
Yes, am I on?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Hey everyone, I've been asked to chair the Environmental Concerns Committee this year, and there's good news, there's plenty of space on the committee left. So if you want to be a part of the committee, I would go so far as to say there's a co-chair or 2 up for grabs if you really want to, if that grabs your fancy. But this year, as you know, the Rotary Foundation announced that supporting the environment has been added as a new area of focus. One of the things that really impresses me about this club is how we always take the lead and we go above and beyond. And I'd like to do the same with this committee as we're kicking this off and in our first year. So we're looking at a number of projects and ideas. I will say, love to have you on the committee. I'm a very non-pushy person, so give a little, give a lot, give whatever you can, but involvement would be really appreciated, and I'd sure like to make this a successful year. Contact me if you wish to be on the committee, and we'll get it done. Thanks.
Thanks, Dave. I am not seeing anybody else with raised hands or in the chat, but if you do have an announcement, if you just want to speak up now. All right, back to you, Barb.
Great, thank you, Devin. Well, in our last year of Rotary, especially once we went virtual with COVID, our past president, President then, Jim Connard, started a wonderful tradition, which is called the Rotary Moment of Gratitude and Positivity. And given that we're all living our lives in our homes and a little bit perhaps isolated, I think it's a great tradition and I want to keep that going. So this week I've asked Lynette Marshall if she would share her Rotary Moment of Gratitude and Positivity. Lynette?
Hello, everyone, and thank you, President Barb, for asking me to share my own moment. I want to thank also President Jim for starting this great tradition, and I'm really pleased to share my gratitude for Rotary and to tell you about a new way that I have recently become engaged. So just a little bit about my history in Rotary. I joined in 1989 as a charter member of one of the first clubs that was chartered with a woman president. back when I was working at the University of Illinois. And I have really appreciated my affiliation with Rotary every year since then. One of the things at this stage of my life that I appreciate upon reflection is that Rotary has been there at all different stages of my life. When I was a single person, when I was a mother with young children. I've also appreciated the networks of friends that I gained as I grew older and progressed in my career. And I was really happy to be engaged at a deeper level when I was able to serve as president of the small but engaged Rotary Club of Savoy, Illinois. Jeffrey and I loved serving as hosts for Rotary Youth Exchange students, as well as sort of counselors for some of the ambassadorial scholars. 15 years ago, I was excited to be able to join our club here in Iowa City Noon. And while the demands of my university role have sometimes kept me from being as active as I would like, I cherish the strong commitment to community and to international service that this club and its many members demonstrate every year. I was invited this spring to a new kind of engagement in Rotary through the Rotary Foundation, the Rotary International Foundation. And I was asked to serve on the Rotary Foundation Fund Development Committee. We are a committee that is comprised of 3 Rotary Foundation trustees and 6 non-trustee Rotarians. And I was delighted to attend the first meeting recently and to discover that we have committee members from India, Kenya, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Scotland, Taiwan, Turkey, Mexico, and the United States. So you can imagine how much fun it is for the staff to organize Zoom calls. We're staffed by 2 very capable Rotary Foundation staff members, including the Foundation's Chief Philanthropy Officer, Eric Schmeling, and our very own University of Iowa alumna and graduate of our Philanthropic Studies program here at the University of Iowa, Helen Dixon. So that was a fun connection to be able to make with Iowa City. Our work on the Fund Development Committee is to advise and to support the efforts of the Rotary Foundation, which has as its goal raising $410 million in fiscal year 21 through 3 different avenues, primarily the continuing support of every Rotarian every year, which goes to the annual fund. As Barb just mentioned, the polio project that supports the polio endgame strategy in collaboration with the World Health Organization, UNICEF, and the Gates Foundation, as well as the Rotary Endowment. I'm really proud of the support that our club and our individual Rotarians have made to Rotary Foundation and Rotary International, and I pledge to offer my best guidance and support possible to these important efforts. I assure you that I have already discovered that our club and members of our club are well known by the Rotary staff because of the historic leadership and the very generous support that has already been provided. And I look forward to continuing to help sustain that tradition. Thanks for inviting me, President Barb.
You bet. Thank you, Lynette. That was wonderful. And good luck in your term. And we appreciate everything that you are doing for Rotary Foundation. So thank you. So next is one of the best things that we do in Rotary, and that is welcoming new members into our club. And so today, we will do an induction of Alissa Jarrett. And so before we get started with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ryan Bell, her sponsor, to do an introduction. Ryan?
Thanks, Barb. I can already imagine Alyssa's beet red because she hates people talking about her. And she's texted me about 19 times making sure that I am nice in doing this. I actually just lost the info she sent me. So I'm going to totally wing it, Alissa. No, just kidding. She was born and raised here in Iowa City. So she's a local to the core. She graduated from Regina, got her accounting degree from Quincy University over in Illinois, and her master's degree from Illinois State. She's super involved in the community and her business. Just through Regina, she's part of the foundation board. She coaches softball and basketball. She's a Hall of Fame board member. And she was a stud athlete back in her day too. She's a Hall of Fame member as well. Marketing committee, gala committee, University of Iowa, Children's Hospital Advisory Committee, and a chamber ambassador. She's worked in her family business for 9 years, kind of done everything there, I think, except for installed air conditioners. I don't see that on here. She loves the diversity each day brings, and this is cool. She's the first female involved in the family business, the 67-year-old family business, so kudos there. She's got 2 daughters, Brandt and Marin. Brandt attends Regina. Marin goes to Kitty Connection, and I'm sure will go to Regina. And the whole crew resides on the east side of Iowa City. And I am just personally really happy to bring Alissa on board. She's going to be an awesome Rotarian. So thanks for joining, Alissa, and welcome.
Thanks, Ryan.
Okay, she doesn't look quite as red as Ryan made it sound like she was going to be. So, Alissa, you have been approved for membership in this club, and because we believe that you are a worthy representative of your vocation, that you're interested in the ideals of Rotary, and that you're willing to do your share in translating those ideals into action. So Rotary is a non-political, non-discriminatory, and non-denominational. Our impact starts with our members, people who work tirelessly with their clubs to solve some of the most difficult challenges in our communities. Our efforts are supported by Rotary International and the Rotary Foundation, which turns our donations into grants that fund the work of our members and partners all around the globe. So when you become a member of the Iowa City Noon Rotary Club, you will be joining over 1.2 million Rotarians around the world. Now, Rotary International uses the term JET to describe what we do so well, and I challenge you to do the same. We want you to join leaders, exchange ideas, and take action. So your challenge as a new Rotarian is to get involved. Join at least one committee, and then we also encourage you to bring guests and introduce them to Rotary. So I now invite our members to welcome Alissa to our club. Now, typically we would stand, so let's all do just a virtual round of applause if we can. Alissa, welcome to Rotary, and we are thrilled to have you as a member of our club. Do you want to say a few words?
Sure. Thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to it. My grandfather, Tim Brandt, was actually president at one point of the Noon Rotary. And then my dad, Bill, has been involved prior years. So it was really nice to get involved with Ryan. He's a dear friend of mine. So I'm looking forward to seeing and meeting more people and to getting involved again.
Wonderful. Welcome. So what a great thing. So, you know, in our club, we are lucky. We're a big club. We're active. And so we really welcome you to join our ranks. So before we move on to the next part of the meeting, I do want to take a few minutes and just address the club as your new president. So I just want to share that, you know, I've been thinking about this a lot, and it is certainly an unusual year to become president of a Rotary club. So this spring, when I was at President-elect training, I came across a quote from Paul Harris, which actually I think is really fitting for this year. And in that quote, he said, "If Rotary is to realize its proper destiny, it must be evolutionary and at times revolutionary." Now, some people might remember that saying, "Welcome to the revolution." Well, I like to think of it as welcome to the evolution, because our club will have to evolve this year. So some of the biggest challenges are whether we will be able to meet in person again. Now, I think we can all agree that most importantly, we want our members to be safe and to be healthy. We know that if we do meet in person, we will need to have options electronically to either stream that or to record those meetings. But if you remember, we're trying to gauge how you feel about that. So about 2 weeks ago, we actually sent out a survey about your willingness to meet in person. So you have until the end of the day tomorrow to fill out that survey, and then I will talk about some of those results next week. And I will include a link to that survey when we send out the video of today's meeting. So you can also be prepared that we will probably have to survey you again, and perhaps again and again, because, you know, this COVID situation is ever changing. We think we might know what is happening now, and then tomorrow it's completely different. But just know that we're going to search, we're going to look for your advice and your input as we do this. And as we look ahead for the next year, I do want to let you know about some of the efforts that we're going to try to focus on. We're going to try to build a strong membership committee that really focuses on recruitment, retainment, and engagement. So new members, like Alissa, are key to the long-term success of our club. We all have a role to play in that. It is our job to invite friends and introduce them to Rotary. We'll also be holding a brainstorming session about membership in a couple of weeks. And if you're interested in attending that, I encourage you to email me and let me know. In addition, I've been working on trying to confirm and if needed, recruit new committee chairs, because our club is as good as our committees. We need lots of people and lots of opportunities for people to get involved. If you're not on a committee and you'd like to be, but you don't know what to do, then again, I want you to reach out to me and let's talk about it and figure out where you can get involved. In addition, we're expanding our PR efforts. Thanks to a revised committee with a chair of Tricia Smith, we're actually looking at, you know, increasing our visibility through Facebook. So if you are on Facebook, and I know that many of you are, I want to make sure that you go out there and you like our page, you follow it, and when you see our posts, we want you to share that, because every time you share our Facebook post, you're actually helping us spread that message about Rotary. In addition, we'll be spending some efforts highlighting Rotary's Polio Plus campaign. And we'll also be supporting our community through a special COVID-related grants program that we will be announcing later in a few weeks once we work through all of those details. So most importantly, in this weird year that we're in, we need to find new ways to engage our members, to keep members connected, to provide opportunities for safe volunteerism. And so I want to encourage you that if you have ideas in that, please reach out to me and share those ideas. Our greatest generation has been instrumental in the growth, the prominence, and impact that this club has had in our community. And that is what we want today, tomorrow, and in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years down the road. But to be great, we all need to be involved. We need to each recruit new members. We need to be involved in community work. We need to volunteer. We need to provide financial support. We have almost 300 members in this club. And if we can inspire and engage and empower those members, if every person does just a little bit more, think of the amazing impact our club can have on our community and this world. So I encourage you to join me, get inspired, get engaged. And if you're not sure, reach out, because there's plenty of us who would like to get your help on some of the efforts that we're doing. Together, we can have an absolutely amazing impact. And it's my honor to try to lead this club, especially in this virtual year that we have started in. This year will be like none other, but we will follow Paul Harris's words, and we will be evolutionary, and if we have to, revolutionary, in order to do good in this world and to have an impact. So I just wanted to share those thoughts with you. And then with that, we actually are able to go to our program. So today, our program will be introduced by Kelly Staub. So Kelly, would you like to introduce our guest?
Yes, thank you. Today we have a special speaker. His name is Anant Kamath. I introduced him earlier. I'm very excited to have him speak today. He has 30 years of experience in biotechnology industry. He has served as the Chief Operating Officer at the Cellular Engineering Technologies, which is an Iowa-based stem cell and cancer biotechnology company. That is a mouthful. Mr. Kamath has been responsible for new commercial product development, daily scientific operations, and international presentations. He has expertise in stem cell and tumor cell culture, disease biomarker research, molecular biology, protein production, and device development. Besides all of that, he is also a published author and a licensed attorney. Today, he is going to be speaking on the early detection of human and viral biomarkers, implications for disease diagnosis and treatment. Anant, I will hand it over to you. I'm very excited to hear what you have to say today.
Well, first of all, I would like to thank each and every one of you for inviting me, specifically Kelly and Kwanse. You can hear me, right, all of you? So the moral of the story goes is that I met Kelly and Kwanse for lunch about a week before the coronavirus struck. And so when we met, the topic of our discussion was completely unrelated to some of the things that I'm going to speak to you about today. But you'll see how science dovetails different topics into one amalgam. And what I want you to take home from today's topic is that science has significantly advanced the diagnosis and treatment of what you might think are intractable diseases. My talk is going to be fairly high level, but it might be confusing to some of you. And so if it is, please stop me any time in my presentation and feel free to ask questions. I think that that's more spontaneous than holding it all in the end. And so I'm going to start sharing my screen and starting my PowerPoint presentation. If there are any technical difficulties, please let me know right away so that we can stop and address those. But I hope to keep it short, and I hope to keep it as least confusing as I can make it. So the first thing I want to essentially speak to is that my colleagues and I started out a startup company called Exogene Bio, which was related to some of the work that I did at Cellular Engineering, but was more focused on the early detection of human and viral biomarkers. And the reason for viruses will become apparent in a couple of minutes. My talk is titled The Early Detection of Human and Viral Biomarkers, Implications for Disease Diagnosis and Treatment. And unfortunately, as you can probably imagine, either you or someone you love or someone you know has gone through some sort of pathological condition, whether it's diabetes, cardiovascular failure, or cancer. Diseases are all around us, and unfortunately, poor disease diagnosis leads to poor prognostication and poor outcomes. Now, one specific disease that I want to focus on right now is cancer. And I would imagine that all of you have been touched by cancer in some way, whether it's personal to you or whether it's peripheral to a loved one that you know. If you look at this graphic, what it suggests is that if you diagnose a tumor or a cancer early in time, you'll yeah, go ahead.
Do you want to try sharing your screen again? It didn't come through the first time.
Oh, okay. Hold on. Let me try that. Can you see it now?
Yep, there we go.
Okay, well, let me just get to that first slide. And so what I was saying essentially is that early diagnosis essentially determines what type of outcome you have. And whether that is in cancer or whether that's in diabetes or cardiovascular failure, these statistics are essentially epidemiologically identical. You can see, for example, that in breast cancer treatment, if you're diagnosed at stage 0 or 1, which is a local tumor, you almost have a 100% chance of survival. But if you're diagnosed at stage 4, chances of you dying are greater than 8 out of 10, which is sobering to say the least. And so what we were looking at is, are current diagnostics relevant to treating people or giving them a better chance at survival versus new technologies that might come to the fore? So most of these are kind of background slides, but something that you're probably familiar with. Most people have yearly diagnostic exams, and they involve things like colonoscopies, mammograms, etc., where occult blood or polyps or tumors are detected based on a scan. And if you do have symptomology, sometimes you have headaches or you have other issues like dizziness or trouble standing up, you go in for an MRI and a brain tumor is detected. But what has happened is that anytime you go in at this level of diagnosis, that cancer or tumor is already spread in your body. And so you're looking at something that is beyond stage 1 and probably metastatic at that point. Now, if you are a patient or you know of some patients, you know that you've heard terms like genetic biopsies or personalized medicine have entered the lexicon of treatment methodologies. And right now, we do have rudimentary biomarkers that are tested, even for example, at UFI Healthcare.
I'm in 8th place in the league for net score.
What's that? Can you come again? Anyways, moving on, you can take a look at some of these other disease biomarkers that are available in clinic, but the problem is that the specificity of these biomarkers is low. And what that means is that even though you might have the presence or absence of these biomarkers, their correlation with the specific disease is fairly low. So what we looked at was something called the liquid biopsy. And I think that as you probably move on in the next 5, 10, or 15 years, the term liquid biopsy will become as commonplace as chemotherapy, radiation, or resection. And so the way you can kind of visualize liquid biopsy is to look at a neighborhood. And in that neighborhood, you can look at all of your organs as your neighbors and yourself for that matter. And what that implies is that all of your organs have crosstalk. So your brain is speaking to your pancreas is talking to your liver, your colon is talking to your liver and stomach, et cetera, et cetera. And there's always crosstalk between all of these organs that are releasing these small biomarkers. Now, what we're looking at is to sample these biomarkers much earlier in time when you're asymptomatic than when you actually develop a disease state. That is to say that we're looking at diseases before they really become floored, even prior to stage 0. And to do that, what we do is we isolate specific body compartments, specifically blood and saliva. So if we took a drop of your blood or we took a drop of your saliva and we subjected it to these tests that we have developed, we could actually detect various things in there. They include DNA, for example, that is specific for specific diseases, and these little circular vesicles called exosomes. Later in my talk, we'll also talk about the detection of novel coronaviruses, which I think is now relevant based on the methodology that's being used in the state and some of the problems that have occurred since using that methodology. Now, the advantages of liquid biopsy is that there's no pain to the patient. So if you're looking at a pediatric patient, you're looking at a geriatric patient, et cetera, it takes less than 2 minutes to do. There's no pain to the patient, there's no biopsy. The expenditure of cost is much less because you don't have to go through an MRI, you don't have to go through a CT scan, you don't have to go through a PET scan. And the most important thing is that diseases, when you subject them to liquid biopsy, are much earlier in time and much more curable. And what that essentially implies in the context of cancer is that it gives us a grip on cancers that are asymptomatic or silent. And those include things like pancreatic cancer, which don't manifest themselves until there are symptoms like abdominal pain or digestive issues, colon cancer, where we're looking at occult blood in the stool, brain tumors, which lead into behavioral disruption or loss of senses, such as eyesight or hearing, and all other cancers that essentially become only diagnosable when they're either metastatic or floored. So the company that we created looked at specific things that we could sample in a liquid biopsy. And the two things that we came up with were these little things called exosomes, which I will get into right now, and these things called DNA biomarkers. Now, exosomes you can think of as little vesicles that your cells release. So as you're sitting here viewing my presentation, the trillion cells that you have in your body are releasing these little round blobs. Now, in the 80s, people thought these little round blobs were just excess garbage that the cells create that needs to get destroyed so that you don't have an infinite accumulation of waste. Well, it turns out that these little blebs were not garbage, but they were actually signaling mechanisms that cells used both locally and distally. And by distally, I mean all over your body. And so these exosomes are tiny little vesicles. And when I mean tiny, I mean 1 nanometer in size. And so nanometer, if you're looking at things that are comparative, and I have a chart that I'll show you in a few minutes, a nanometer is 1 × 10⁻⁹ meters. So a dot would be considered 1 millimeter in size. So you're looking at something that is essentially 1 billion times smaller than that dot. But due to modern technologies, we can actually query these exosomes and look at the content there within. And so based on these exosomes, we can detect and see what they have in terms of their cargo, which implies what type of disease you might be having. So for example, you're sitting here, you don't know whether you have a pancreatic tumor or not, but your pancreas and the cells in your pancreas are actively releasing exosomes that have genetic material that suggests that a tumor is in the offing. If you could treat that patient right now by doing a liquid biopsy and looking at those tumor biomarkers, they would potentially be cured. Now, people like Alex Trebek, who you're probably quite familiar with, Alex Trebek didn't have any symptoms of pancreatic cancer until he had essentially doubled over in the bathroom because he had abdominal pain. And that's usually the first thing a patient with pancreatic cancer will see or detect in terms of either jaundice or severe digestive issues. By then, the tumor has essentially compromised the pancreas, the liver, and the colon. And the prognostic outcomes for that are very low. And most people with pancreatic cancers live a total survival rate of less than 2 years. The same thing happens in glioblastomas, which are brain tumors that are common both in childhood and adulthood. And even with modern technology, the survival rate of those tumors is anywhere from 4 months to a year. And that's terrible for people who have it, and it's terrible for the caregivers who have to deal with those individuals because it's devastating both physically to the person who has it and emotionally to the caregiver who has to experience it. Now, these exosomes are not only implied in cancer, but they're implied in other diseases such as Alzheimer's disease. They're implied in dementias. They're implied in diabetes, cardiovascular failure, and even in impact injuries such as football, in certain things like chronic traumatic encephalopathies, which football players have many, many years after they're retired. And so these exosomes are now a standard paradigm that we can look at, both in terms of looking at disease and both in terms of looking at therapy. And so what we've done is we've developed an assay where we can take literally 1 drop of your blood or a little bit of your saliva or a little bit of your urine and pass it through a specific system that we have developed with a large semiconductor company that can isolate your exosomes with greater than 95% purity within 10 minutes. Once we isolate those exosomes, we can purify and look at all of the genetic cargo that is contained there within and see whether you are going to be susceptible for these diseases very early in time so you can develop treatment for it. I'll just give you a concrete example. Right now, Alzheimer's disease, which is prevalent and which is actually increasing in prevalence, there's no test for Alzheimer's disease. Alzheimer's disease is a disease that is now just behavioral in terms of a patient who cannot remember things, a patient who easily forgets things, and has certain criteria of dementia. But the gold standard for Alzheimer's disease right now is postmortem. That is to say, once the patient who has suspected Alzheimer's disease dies, they remove your brain and they actually section it to look at these tangles within the brain to see whether you had that disease. Now imagine if you had a test for Alzheimer's disease that could detect the prevalence of disease much earlier in time and your predisposition to getting it so that we can develop better therapies for that particular illness. Now, this is work that was done by my former colleague who is now in San Diego, looking at the brain. And she do you have a question? All right, I'll continue. So this looked at exosomes within the brain and specifically focused on one of the parts of the brain called the hippocampus. The hippocampus, as you may or may not be aware with, is the central arbiter of memories. So my talk today, or the lunch you ate, or the breakfast you consumed, all will go through all different sensory modalities, such as your eyes, your ears, your nose, and any other visual or other clues that you have through the hippocampus. The hippocampus is the first organ that degenerates during the formation of Alzheimer's disease. And that's important because once the hippocampus is gone, no new memories can be made. And that's why people who have Alzheimer's disease often remember things that they did 50 years ago, 60 years ago, but they don't remember where they kept their pen 5 minutes ago, because the hippocampus has essentially been degraded. Now, what my former colleague did was looked at the exosomal density of these little tiny microvesicles in the hippocampus and saw that hippocampus memories, or the neurons within the hippocampus, the nerve cells, which were important for the hippocampus to work, were essentially determined by the number of exosomes or the exosomal density within that particular organ. And so what that led us to say is that exosomes probably are their central determination, not only in terms of cancer detection, but also in these other diseases that are prevalent in the increasingly geriatric population, like Alzheimer's disease, dementia, and other neurological diseases like ALS, Parkinson's disease, and other diseases that are both chronic and indolent. And so we looked at exosomes both as a diagnostic criteria and, as you will see shortly, as a therapeutic modality for actually reversing disease states. Now, as I said to you, these things are really tiny. And unfortunately, when they're tiny, it's hard to conceptualize things because, large things you can hold in your hand, you can see them very easily, but things like viruses, exosomes, et cetera, are so small that you really can't make sense of it till you actually see a picture of it. So on the left is a scale in nanometers. Again, 1 nanometer is 1/1000th of 1 meter. 1 meter is approximately about 3 feet and change. And that shows you how big an exosome is compared to just a period on a sentence. So if you think a period on a sentence is about 1 million in terms of scale, your exosome is somewhere between 10. So you're talking about really, really tiny things. And so in that insect, you can actually see exosomes that have been isolated. Those are real exosomes from a patient. So as we sit here, our cells are busy making these tiny microvesicles that are communicating with each other, that determine everything in your body, that determine signaling, they determine your aging, they determine your future diseases, they determine the health status that you have, they determine the energetics. Essentially, every human system that's in your body is determined by exosomes and these biomarkers that are now going to enter the clinic. So the central difficulty in getting exosomes is that how do you isolate such a tiny particle from such a large amount of volume? When you think of your human body, you're looking at 1 trillion cells and you're looking at essentially 8 gallons of blood. And so we're trying to isolate exosomes from 1 drop of blood in a system which has multiple different complicated molecules that are all floating around. And so what we did was our company partnered with a large semiconductor company in New York, and I'm sure most of you will know what that company is. These days with NDAs, we really can't get into the details of who those folks are. But what we did was we developed a microchip that essentially looks at how you could isolate these tiny particles. And this microchip in this video, you'll see that there are different particles of different sizes that essentially enter this microchip. And so this microchip is similar to what you would have in a computer, except this is an intersection of computer science and biology. So if you can imagine, that's a drop of blood or a drop of your saliva or a drop of your urine that has been loaded in that particular microchip. And you can see the exosomes, which are in green and which are smaller, are being segregated by those post pillars that have been mathematically designed so that they can be purified. So within 10 minutes, we can take a drop of your blood and collect your exosomes in a purified fashion while discarding everything else that is unnecessary and irrelevant to what we want to look at. Now, I have a short video here which essentially talks about the complexity of design, and this was done with our partner. The one thing that you should probably appreciate, at least during this talk, is that the complexity of science these days has increased multifold. What you probably did in biology in the 80s or the 70s has little relevance to what we're doing right now. And that's one of the things that I really enjoy with my job, is that I get to do things that, you know, change on a daily or even an hour-to-hour basis. And so this is a kind of a real-time analysis of a patient's real exosomes that are being sorted. So why do I say this? I say this because one out of every 4 individuals that I'm speaking with today will come down with some form of cancer. Those individuals who come down with cancer will go to a clinic. They'll give you different modalities of treatment, including chemotherapy, radiation, etc. None of those modalities that you will experience are specific to your tumor. In other words, the tumor modalities that we have in terms of killing involve just killing of fast dividing cells. And it doesn't discriminate whether they're good cells that are fast dividing, such as those in your mouth, in your intestine, in your stomach, etc., or tumor cells that are being targeted. And the bigger problem is that ultimately those tumor cells will develop resistance. And so the chemotherapy or the radiation that you will be taking will eventually become ineffective. And if you have a stage 4 tumor, that tumor is spread to other organs in your body. Then it becomes more and more difficult to get a higher rate of survival, because those tumor cells are essentially outstripped the ability of the current modalities that we have to treat you and to try to cure you. And so we are trying to develop new diagnostic and treatment criteria that overcome both resistance and diagnostic failure. And the reason why diagnostic failure is important is because if you are diagnosed early in time, even drugs that are available in the clinic right now can cure you. You will be cured of cancer. And right now, we can't say that. It's ironic because, the original cancer moonshot was actually initiated by Richard Nixon in 1971 when I was 1 year old. And now you probably heard of Joe Biden, who said the same thing with the Obama administration in 2015. And it's really been 5 years since then, and nothing new has really entered the clinic. And so we're trying to be disruptive in entering the clinic with these new modalities that are previously been not looked at. So before the COVID pandemic struck, what we were looking at was to create a medical device that essentially would enter the medical biology laboratory testing facilities of hospitals. And by that, what we meant was that we could take multiple patients and look at their profile, their blood profile, both during a yearly physical and during treatment to see what type of diseases they had. And we could easily create different disease panels that spoke to what they were being tested for. So for example, you would go into your yearly physical, they would test you in conjunction with your mammogram or your colonoscopy or your prostate serum antigen, every other cancer type that you might be specifically relevant to, your age, your race, your gender, etc. That would take a total of 20 minutes, and it would require no more than 1 drop of blood or 1 drop of urine. So we're looking at the system to be an integrative model, an integrated machine that essentially uses this particular microchip to look at both exosomes and cell-free biomarkers to look at what type of disease states you might be potentially up for in the future. This also will dovetail the people who are undergoing cancer treatment right now, because it turns out that if your cancer treatment is actually effective, the amount of biomarkers that you have, both cell-free and exosomes, actually reduces in numbers. So why is that important? It's important because the drugs that are given to patients right now are highly toxic. And even if they're trying to help individuals who are undergoing these treatments, many of them are ineffective. The last thing you want to do is have systemic toxicity to patients with drugs that are ineffective. And sadly, that's not something that is unusual or unheard of. The way cancer therapy works, at least in terms of chemotherapy, is they try a regimen based on epidemiological data. If that regimen doesn't work, they try something called salvage therapy, which sounds as terrible as what it implies, which is to try to salvage the patient's health. And then if that doesn't work, you know, ostensibly there's hospice care and palliative care. And, you know, that is not a paradigm that we really think is appropriate for individuals who are undergoing these particular diseases. And there has to be a better way to treat these folks. And so we are assiduously working on developing this machine that combines the microchip that has already been developed to isolate these biomarkers and to test for their identities. One last concluding slide on the exosomes. And if you don't, you know, if you don't get anything out of this talk, the one thing you should get out of this talk is that all of us have exosomes in the trillions of numbers. Those exosomes are coursing through your body as we speak, as we rest, as we sleep, and they're communicating from cell to cell, organ to organ in your body at every given instance that you're alive. Those exosomes essentially determine every metabolic state that your cells are undergoing, whether it's a good thing or whether it's a bad thing. And so exosomes, depending on what type of cargo they're carrying, can either form cancer, they can give you Alzheimer's disease, they can give you ALS, they can give you Parkinson's disease, or they can also give you good health with the cargo that they contain. So what we're doing with this is that we are actually going to use exosomes as therapy. The reason for that is exosomes are relevant to where they come from. So you can think of exosomes as carrying a tiny zip code, and they say, well, I originate at such and such street with such and such address. So if you take them and you remove their cargo and you insert the cargo that you want, they will go back to the address where they came from. And so, for example, you can think of this in the context of pancreatic or brain tumors. We take exosomes from the pancreatic cancer. We remove the cargo that's in that pancreatic cancer exosome. We put in a gene that essentially reverses that pancreatic cancer. And then we just reinfuse it in a patient. And that's just like a reverse blood draw. You would send in a seed, there would be no pain, there would be no side effects, there would be nothing in terms of systemic toxicity like chemotherapy, and those exosomes would go back into the pancreatic tumor. They would dock with the tumor cells, they would release their cargo, and in essence reverse the pathology that you had, while not doing anything at the same time to healthy cells that are in the pancreas or to healthy cells that are in surrounding organs that are so critical to human life. What this can also do is it can go through the blood-brain barrier to go after spinal tumors, brain tumors, and tumors that are in previously privileged areas. For example, people who undergo brain tumor resections or people who undergo radiation for brain tumors will never be the same, because not only does it affect the tumor that is being treated, but it also impacts the cells that are surrounding that tumor, which are healthy and active. And so if you look at this and you really distill this down, you're looking at really, really small particles. And I'm sure a proportion of you have said that, well, if exosomes are so tiny and they're round, well, what about viruses? Well, as you know, March 25th changed humanity, as it were, by looking at the novel coronaviruses. And I know that if cancer is an abstract topic for you, this is not, because we're meeting virtually, so this has changed the way society has behaved. And I'm not, you know, I don't know whether there's a show of hands, but how many of you have probably taken the swab coronavirus test? There has to be some of you, and some of you probably had the infection and recovered from it. But one of the biggest concerns with coronavirus that is there right now is, how do you know whether you actually have coronavirus, and can you test for it in a very rapid and quick manner? And one of the things that we are developing in our own lab is a 10-minute coronavirus test, which you can do with saliva in the comfort of your own home, which is visual, and will give you a result with 99% accuracy within 10 minutes, which does not involve taking a swab and sticking it where people say, you know, they feel it's almost in their brain, but it's not, obviously. But, you know, there's certain discomfort to the swabbing, not to mention that you have to send it to a test Iowa center which then does a PCR, which then gets uploaded. This would be done in 10 minutes, and the cost of this test would be $10. And so you could retest individuals all the time, or if you're having a Rotary meeting, you could test individuals as they come into your meeting, and the people who test positive, could be secluded or masked, and the people who test negative will be a non-coronavirus patients. And so these are the same principles that we have used in terms of exosomal isolation. And this is a test that we hope will be rolled out in the market at the end of this month. And so if you look at that,
Anant, if I could actually, I'm sorry to interrupt. We're kind of coming close to the end.
This is my last slide anyway. So
okay, great.
I just wanted to show you what that test looks like in practice, and would require essentially the drop of your saliva and could be read by you within 10 minutes in any environment. But I want to thank all of you for having me on board today. I know that the topic is very esoteric, and I'm sure you probably have questions, but if you do, feel free to either contact me or ask them now. If you don't have questions, I at least hope that this kind of spurs some thought-provoking processes in your head so that you can realize that high technology is present in the corridor area and is being applied to modern problems. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anant. We do have time for one quick question. Gary Pesha, you do have your hand raised. Gary, would you like to ask your question if you could?
Yeah, I would. But the question I have is going back to the exosome test. Is there a target date for availability, and what are we talking about cost to individuals? Like you spoke of the cost for the COVID test.
Sure. So I'll address the COVID test first and then go to the exosome. The cost of production of the COVID test is probably about $3 a strip. We plan on retailing it anywhere from $8 to $10 a strip. And that could be compensated by insurance and become cheaper also. Just to give you a head-to-head, the RT-PCR test that's being used by Test Iowa and the NOMI Corporation is about $100 a sample. So this would be 10 times cheaper than that. The advantage of this is it requires no special machines and can be cost effectively produced. So we can crank out 5 to 10 million strips per batch compared to RT-PCR, which at the most would be a couple 100,000. And so you can do contact tracing much more efficaciously and much cheaper. And the test, once it's run, can be archived very easily, even on your smartphone, by just taking a picture, and it will be colorimetric. So it's easy to detect, and it doesn't reverse color. So you can keep it stored with the QRS code pretty much forever. Going back to the liquid biopsy, the exosome microchip is probably going to be in the area of $6 in terms of cost of production. And in terms of sale, it'll probably be around $50. To give you a head-to-head, Cologuard, which is currently in the market right now, Cologuard's test runs about $600 for a similar test. So we're looking at about 1/6 the cost of that in terms of multiple cancers being detected at the same time versus one type of cancer, which is colon cancer in theirs.
Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anant, if you're willing, if you are willing to take emails, if you could put your email into the chat.
Sure.
That way we could share it with members so that we could encourage you, if anybody has a question, to please email Anant.
Sure.
And also, Anant, in appreciation of your talk today, our club will actually be donating $10 to Rotary's Polio Plus program.
That's
and then
great.
that $10 is actually matched 2 to 1 by the Gates Foundation. And that means that that $30 will actually create 70 vaccines. So we'll do that in honor of your participation today.
Thank you very much. Virology is, that was my major. And so I know polio and the outreaches of Afghanistan and Pakistan have been very difficult based on the terrain and based on some of the stigma people have had with a particular vaccine. So I appreciate your efforts, because just like smallpox, my mentor actually was D.A. Henderson, who was responsible for getting rid of smallpox, and so at Johns Hopkins. And so D.A. was responsible for that virus, and I know that polio, is a cause that needs to be addressed and tamped down. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So if there is no other business before the club, I invite you all to join me in the 4-way test. Of all the things that we think, say, or do, is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? And with that, our meeting is adjourned. Thank you all. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Done.